With the question of whether President Biden will stay the course when it comes to sanctions. Both Presidents Obama and Trump stayed the course, but they both tended to wait at least until about 6 months in office to do so. Mr. Biden, it can be argued, is trumping Mr. Trump and Mr. Obama. Within his first 2 months in office, he's already bombed Syria, sanctioned China, and now sanctioned Russia. Time for context and perspective. And to do that, we're going to bring in a full panel, individuals with unique perspectives on this. Joining me is George Galloway, former member of the British Parliament, former naval officer John Jordan, and Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times bureau chief Chris Hedges. Chris, I think I begin with you to answer the question about whether we, by sanctioning this unbelievably long list of countries that we're sanctioning, are not in essence, or is it fair to say that we are also politically influencing the elections and the politics of other nations?
Well, I spent 20 years overseas, so I watched how we did it. Of course, 1996, giving an estimated $1.5 billion, that's billion dollars, to reelect Yeltsin. I was in Latin America for 6 years. You're certainly very fluent with that situation as well. There wasn't an election we didn't interfere in. I read the report. Of course, there's no evidence. These are all accusations. Nobody's, and they claim this, I'm quoting, that Russia is attempting to exacerbate the socio-political divisions in the United States. Well, that is the business model for the entire media universe in the United States. They hardly need help from Russia. And I'm waiting. We saw a New York Times article yesterday on this, and I'm waiting for the New York Times article that talks about the country that actually interferes in massive ways in the U.S. electoral process, and that's Israel through AIPAC, the Israel Project, Stand With Us, the spying on smearing critics, especially American university students that support the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, using huge cash donations far above the U.S. legal limit to influence campaigns, flying hundreds of members of Congress to Israel for lavish and unpaid vacations at Israeli seaside resorts, bribing lawmakers to doing Israel's bidding, including the massive amounts of military aid, over $3 billion a year, over $40 billion over the last 10 years in Congress, character assassination. I mean, why is this completely not, when you get an article like this in the Times, why is there this deafening silence on the part of the country that actually has a stranglehold on U.S. electoral politics and U.S. policy, especially in the Middle East?
What do you make, John Jordan, of this report that came out, this intel report that was released yesterday?
Well, first of all, Rick, anything that the U.S. intelligence community is so politicized and is so invested in the Russia narrative. I mean, because keep in mind, they're hip deep in it, going back to Mueller and Trump and all of this. So I am deeply suspicious of their impartiality. Moreover, the New York Times is deeply invested in the Russia was pro-Trump narrative. The fact of the matter is, you just look at the interest, the economic interest of these countries. Russia is a country which is dependent more than any other big OECD country on energy prices. And what Trump was doing was actually really hard on Russia. He was driving oil prices down. He was trying to make U.S. gas and alternative sources of natural gas cheaper and more common in central northern Europe. And that is, if anything is more contrary to Russian interests, I don't know what is. And here Joe Biden is trying to reduce America's energy independence and is going to have the net effect of driving up oil prices, which is beneficial to Russia more than anything else. So I really just don't get it, and I'm deeply suspicious. Former member of the American intelligence community, I got my doubts here.
Speaking of narrative that may be established or that it's in the media's seemingly trying to establish this narrative, I want to play an interview for you right now. This is George Stephanopoulos with ABC, who used to work in the Clinton administration. He's doing an interview with President Biden. George Galloway, take a listen.
You know Vladimir Putin. You think he's a killer?
Mm-hmm. I do.
So what price must he pay?
The price he's going to pay, well, you'll see shortly.
By the way, I'm going to preface this by reading to you what Biden said that caused Stephanopoulos to ask him if Putin was a killer. Mr. Biden says, look, the most important thing dealing with any foreign leader is my experience. I have dealt with an awful lot of them in my career. It's just to know the other guy and who he is. So that's when Mr. Stephanopoulos then says, so you know Vladimir Putin, right? Do you think he's a killer? George, analyze that conversation for me, if you would.
It's extraordinary, fighting talk and no way back from it, really. One could say, if one were being unkind, that after 49 years at the center of American politics, including 8 years in the White House, it's quite likely that Joe Biden's killed a few folks too, as Barack Obama once put it about George W. Bush. The reality is that this report is an infantilizing piece of nonsense. It's treating the American public like children. Your opening remarks, we could have stopped this debate at the last full stop in what you said. You want to talk about interfering in other people's elections, in other people's politics? Look no farther than the Potomac. The world's biggest election interferers are in Washington, D.C., not in Moscow. Now, we're being asked to believe that Russia was backing one side while Iran was backing the other side, and that China didn't do much, although there's a minority report which says they might well have tried. They were on the same side as Iran and a different side from Russia. It all gets completely ridiculous. It reduces the agency of the American people themselves to virtually children, just waiting to be told in a Facebook post by, Big Senga in Alabama, who's really a Russian agent, how she should be feeling about the racial polarization or other conflicts inside America. It's really insulting your intelligence as a people.
Great conversation. I know that we could go on forever. I know many of you, through nuance alone, have differing opinions, even amongst yourself. So let's continue this conversation. I think it's an important one. We're going to continue to have it. My thanks to all three.